And then when you are arrested, as you will be, you have a darn good lawyer with you, and then the next day, a similar number of people show up, and let them get arrested too. You keep doing that until it becomes so embarrassing for the mayor and for Christy Clark as well.
Clark.
And you will get some, you'll get some results, promise you.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, when nuclear armed warships were coming into Vancouver, there was actually a declaration made by all the mayors that surrounded the port in which they asked the federal government to get the nuclear armed warships out of the port. So I think your focus on Robertson is probably right because he's got the biggest rhetoric. But there's other, obviously there's other mayors and municipalities around the bay which could take actions together. I just wanted to point out that corporations are corporations, whether they're Canadian corporations or they're American corporations, and they generally act the same way. If they're in Canada, they're going somewhere else to exploit the resources, such as the mining companies that are all over Central and South America, exploiting their resources in the same kind of way that Americans exploit our resources, like the Chinese. So I don't really understand your emphasis on Canadian corporations and keeping Canadian corporations here. I mean, really, the reality of it is, if we don't nationalize, I'll just finish in a moment. Okay. If we don't nationalize the industries and hold the resources here for the Canadian public, then we're not going to be any better off than we are with Sinopec exploiting the resources of Syncrude, which was a Canadian company.
Okay, it's called legislation and it's called taxation. It's much easier to properly tax Canadian corporations operating in this country than it is to properly tax foreign corporations that use transfer pricing. Do you know what transfer pricing is?
Yeah, I do.
Well, transfer pricing is, I mean, what we've had for years. Who here knows what ESO stands for?
No idea.
What does it stand for? You know what ESO is, don't you? What does it stand for? It stands for Standard Oil. They changed, when they came under pressure around the world with bad publicity for what they were doing, they changed the name from Standard Oil all over the world, and except in Canada, it's Imperial Oil. And I used to be very active in appearing before the National Energy Board, and I used to say, look, you tell me what the policy of Imperial Oil is, and listen to it very carefully, and then do exactly the reverse. That would be the very best thing that we could do in Canada. And the same thing applies in terms of ownership of corporations. You've got a much better opportunity to control the way corporations behave if you are talking about domestically owned corporations. Very difficult to control foreign corporations. They'll come and take over a Canadian company, for example, and they'll transfer all the research and development back to the United States. And then they charge the Canadian subsidiary huge charges for doing that, for doing the R&D for them. And there's many, I just touched on this. There's many similar examples where Canadian corporations have to behave in accordance with Canadian law, and American companies do not. Answer your question.
Yeah.
I say nationalization.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. What do you think of people who seem to believe that that votes aren't counted properly or even accurately at all in the electoral process? And
That's
how would
right.
you reinstill people's belief in the electoral system when there's no safeguards to make sure that votes are counted accurately in the system?
Well, to my knowledge, votes are counted relatively accurately in most of Canada, but not all of Canada. There's no question that sometimes they're fiddled around and the results are not what really should be. God knows in many countries around the world, the results are terrible. Russia is a perfect example today of where the people go out and vote, and the results that are tabbed have nothing to do with how people voted.
How do we know it's not that bad here? We just don't see it because we're here and not in Russia watching.
Well, I don't know that. I travel around Canada quite a bit, and my experience has been that people haven't raised that complaint that often.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're a most unusual species. You know, Harper keeps talking about the economy. You know, we're the only species that engineers and finances our own destruction and does so in the name of economic necessity.
Yeah.
In other words, let me shorten it up. If it makes money, we'll do it, even if it kills us.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you keep saying elect people. With the laws that have been passed in the last year by dear old Stephen, he has bypassed Parliament and replaced it. If you look at Bill C-36 in particular, and other bills have the same provisions, he has bypassed Parliament by making, replacing it with the arbitrary discretion of the minister to be enforced by the SWAT teams and the police state without regress to the courts. In other words, he has removed the rule of law. In other words, it doesn't really matter who you elect because he's already bypassed, he's already sold us.
Don't say it doesn't really matter who you elect. It matters a great deal. Stephen Harper happens to be a very evil man.
We have to take back our Parliament and we have to reverse some of those laws. And I think we have to realize that he has already amalgamated us militarily with the CIA and FEMA and the US military and police can come into Canada and on Canadian soil. We literally have to take back our country.
I agree.
You know, but
I agree.
And one of the first
but
places.
Don't say because one man or a group of bad people are in control of our country that we can't do it otherwise, because we can.
But how do we reverse these laws?
Get involved in politics.
Now, the other thing is, until we remove the private banking system internationally and let countries print their own money interest-free, you're going to have a usury system and it's killing us.
Well, it's a very interesting observation. I prefer to concentrate on the possible and the probable as opposed to things that can be almost impossible to accomplish.
Well, trade deals like CETA are far worse than NAFTA was. And under CETA, the international rulings like Codex, etc., will override whatever our Parliament does. In other words, as long as we enter into these trade agreements, we have actually given away the right to rule ourselves.
Madam, I'm a great believer in democracy and a great believer in citizens' ability to change things for the better. If we couldn't do that, we would be a miserable, lousy society. We can change things for the better. It's hard work, and it's something that we have to concentrate on, and I don't know of any place better in all of Canada than Vancouver to start that out in a really good way. Somebody else wants to speak now.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk, Mel. I had a quick two-part question.
Yep.
What can we do to end the interest drain of Canadian wealth to foreign bankers and restore the sovereignty of the Bank of Canada, as, for instance, proposed in O Canada movie that's free to watch on YouTube?
Oh, Canada.
Well, the